Scientists are blessings to the world. Everyone knows that. Drugs, cures, food processing, gene editing and engineering for stronger and sturdier animals for more meat. Heck, even skincare and general healthy living is all credited to them. Before I bore you with the details that you are well acquainted with, let me cut right to the chase. They are also a huge curse to us. Scientists are the most dangerous people on this planet. Either that or they're just plain stupid. Imagine tampering with nature, changing the genetic makeup of creatures that were already a nightmare to begin with. And out of all these creatures, the most dangerous one of them all, man. The government should never give approval to certain projects. Some things shouldn't just be tampered with. I told them, I warned them, but they never listen. They never fucking listen to reason. Dawn Labs is a scientific industry taxed with research and production of pharmaceuticals that will aid the improvement of the human species as a whole. Drugs that cure world-destroying diseases and save millions of lives were all produced by them. They were the ones responsible for finding a permanent cure to the COVID-19 virus. That was a huge milestone that granted them such strong standing with nations and their various government authorities. I joined them as a lab scientist after the pandemic and found myself honored to be among the lucky few that were selected. For the next 2 years after I joined, we worked on a compound that would remove the weak links in a person's DNA makeup and improve their immunity to almost superhuman levels, making humans resistant to just about every disease Mother Earth could possibly cook up. I really felt elated and above board to be working on such a magnificent project with the most renowned scientists in the world. However, just 3 months into the experiment, I detected a huge flaw. The strand of DNA we were trying to extract and decode was a locked genome in the helix structure. Isolating and then editing such a gene would lead to dire consequences on the entire individual's phenotypical response. My apologies to you all who don't care much for the science, but I just need to get this out there to the world to prevent the catastrophe that befell my country from ever repeating itself. I presented the data to the lead scientist, Mr. Yukimura. He told me all the errors would be accounted for, that we would stop if they found it impossible to extract. Mr. Jim, I appreciate your observations, and I will ensure that I look into them with critical precision. 2 days after I submitted my report, the project was declared a failure and thereby closed. I was relieved to hear that. We went about our normal activities as usual and slowly began to forget about Project Lucas. Those bastard government officials though, they got a whiff of what we were working on and visited us the next day. 3 men dressed in black suits and dark shades made their way through the floors till they got to Mr. Yukimura's office. They stayed in his office for quite some time, then came out many moments later, shook hands with him and left the premises. I had the worst feeling settle upon me after bearing witness to that. Mr. Yukimura informed us the next day that we'd be reopening Project Lucas. Sir, the project was stopped because it had too many loopholes, and it was a bad idea from the very start, albeit with good intentions. Making such things possible could destroy the world as we know it. I thought I was getting through to him when he suddenly gave a desperate look I'd never seen on him before. He boldly announced, "The project is hereby reopened. Work begins on it immediately." I was just about to walk up to him and tender my resignation at that point. I didn't want to be part of such senseless experiment that would definitely end badly. Mr. Yukimura gave us a grave look as he spoke again. The fact that you all have knowledge of Project Lucas means no one is allowed to leave or resign without the completion of this project. Anyone who does will be tracked down by the government and arrested, and God only knows what else they'll do. So my advice, stay and do your jobs. This meeting is disbanded. I found myself shaking from fear of what I was about to get myself into. I certainly didn't want to be arrested and locked up. I convinced myself that I could account for all the flaws in the research and come up with a reasonable solution. After a month of long, hard work, I even rarely had the need to go home because I was always fully occupied with work. Extracting code after code from the DNA of various animals and fixing it with the Lucas strand. So far so good. They'd worked pretty well on animals. All the monkeys and dogs we'd injected and exposed to the drug had become at least twice the original sizes, and their genetic makeup had changed considerably to match and resist any disease they could ever come across. Mr. Yukimura was satisfied with the outcome, and thereby deemed the project worthy of its final testing phase. It was time to experiment on human subjects, time to determine how effective it could be. I knew we weren't anywhere close to perfecting the drug. I knew it wasn't going to be a good idea to use this on the human subject. Of course, all my warnings and pleas fell on deaf, money-blocked, government-awed ears. We were given a day off to recuperate before we had the last phase of the project. I took the time to stay home and find a way to stop this madness. But then I thought about the government officials I'd seen lately. They always had huge weapons with them and armored suits. What could I possibly do against such a bunch? Fear stopped me from making further decisions on that. I spent the rest of the day doing just as I was instructed, recuperating. The next day, 30 subjects were brought in from the facility of correction, close to the lab. I found this unsettling. I mean, sure, some of these guys were criminals, but they were still humans just like the rest of us. And it felt so wrong doing this, but there was nothing I could do. We put them in the lower level of the facility and started the experiment on them. We exposed each of them to a gaseous form of the drug. Then, the wait began. It took almost 3 hours for any sign of response to even show. I silently hoped that the drug would have no effect. Just then, one of my colleagues ran to me with a very worried expression on his face. "Sir, I can't explain what's happening down there. The response those subjects are giving are quite weird. I have never seen anything like this before." My heart raced as I ran to the lower levels. I began to imagine all the possibilities, how the situation could be. But hear me when I say, nothing, no imagination or thought could have prepared me for what I saw down there. I wish I just ran out of the lab that second and found a way to escape. When we got down there, I gasped and shuddered at the image before me. Just where all the subjects had been earlier were now emaciated-looking figures like corpses. They all had been turned into abominations. I knew something like this would happen, but I wasn't expecting anything of this magnitude. I wasn't expecting this at all. Inform the lead scientist immediately. We have to get this matter under control, pronto. Mr. Yukimura came down to see the scene for himself. At first, he looked visibly shaken, but he smiled and said, "It looks like the project is finally a success after all." I looked at him in disgust. What? All due respect, sir. I don't know your definition of success, but it certainly isn't this. He looked at me now with a strange fire in his eyes. What did you really think we were doing down here? Creating drugs for the betterment of humanity? Making things better for people? Don't be naive, boy. The government wanted this. They wanted soldiers who could overcome any situation. Soldiers who were immune to pain, diseases, and possibly even death. Did you really think that all those genes we extracted and fixed into the compound were just for show? This is the result we've been waiting for. Project Lucas is a success. I could not believe what I was hearing right now. How could the government want such a thing? How could they make us create such abominations? I had a bad feeling about this whole ordeal. I just knew it wasn't going to end well. I heard footsteps coming up behind me, and the 3 officials I saw before were right behind me, talking to Mr. Yukimura. Yes, we did just as you asked. We created the perfect soldiers. The officials moved closer to inspect the scene. "You did a great job," the man in the middle said. "We'll be taking these back with us. Our superiors will..." Whatever he was about to say got cut short as his gaze turned to the 15th paddock. We all looked, following his gaze, and my legs began to shake in fear of what I saw in there. It was easily the largest subject. The paddock was 3 meters high and it was almost grazing the top with its head. No, its heads. It had 2 of them. Its body was easily the size of a car, with tentacle-like appendages protruding from its back and 2 huge rock-like arms at its sides. It looked right at us with its red eyes. We created something that truly should never exist. It looked like it had a lot of intelligence too, like it was plotting and scheming. Out of all the subjects, this was easily the most frightening. I just wanted to run far away from that thing and never return. The official made a wild, evil grin. "Oh, this would do just nicely. We'll be taking them all, especially this one." He pointed at the big one. They told us they'd be back the next day to take the subjects. Knowing I could do nothing about it, I said nothing more. We all went home after the entire ordeal. Our job was done and we were able to take a whole week off from work. Personally, I feel we were told to stay home for other reasons. 2 mornings after witnessing that scene, I woke up around 10 a.m. and walked slowly to my porch. I was surprised by what I saw. The clouds were dark and misty, like there was something hanging in the air. I quickly held my breath and thought about what it could be. I realized a little bit late that it was the compound we created that was being pumped into the air. To set my claim in stone, I could see that the origin of the gas was coming from the direction of Dawn Labs. Shit. I quickly ran inside, bolted the doors and got dressed. I took a gas mask with me as I left the house and drove straight to the lab. On my way, I could see how much chaos had ensued. People were fighting each other for no apparent reason. Dogs were barking and all violent. Kids were screaming for their parents while coughing raspily. That wasn't even the worst of it. Some people had already transformed into the monsters we saw the other day, and they began chasing others and biting them. I was shocked to see a young blonde girl rise after being bitten by one and turn right before my eyes into one of those things. We didn't just create any kind of infection. We created one that could easily be transferred. This was bad, very bad. I quickly got out of my car and ran as fast as I could into the lab. It was a chaos in there as well. I could see many scientists running around in panic. I grabbed one of them and slammed him into the wall close by. "Who gave the authorization to release the compound into the air? Who?" he cried out. I don't know, man. There's only one person with such authority. Why don't you go ask him? I'm getting out of here." He pushed me aside and ran off somewhere. I ran straight for the lower levels to see if the government had already come to claim their prize. The cells we put the first subjects were all broken and damaged, almost like those creatures escaped. I shuddered when I thought about the big one. I ran out of there. I had to find Mr. Yukimura. He was the only one who could offer a reasonable explanation for all of this. As I made my way to the upper floors, the lights suddenly went out. I could hear sirens outside as the backup generators kicked in. Oh my god, things had really gotten so bad. I kicked open the door of his office and found him curled up in a corner of his office, cradling and rocking back and forth like a scared child would. My anger was palpable now as I moved towards him, grabbed him by the collar of his shirt, and slammed him into the table. He screamed in agony. "Did you see what your carelessness has caused? Is this really the plan you had all along? Why did you release the compound? It wasn't supposed to be this way. Speak, goddammit!" He kept sobbing like a child, which quickly got on my nerves. I lifted him from the table and pinned his head to the ground with my knee. "Start talking now!" he screamed in pain. "This wasn't how I thought it would go either. They only told me they needed a few. They paid me quite well for it. I just never expected that the subjects would escape." My heart dropped on hearing that. My mind quickly flashed to the big one. That thing really was on the loose somewhere around here. I pressed my knee harder into his head. There has to be something we can do. Something to suppress or even destroy the virus we created, right? "There's no time for that," he said. I gritted my teeth as I freed him from my grip and stood up to think of a way out. We heard noises coming from outside. I motioned for Mr. Yukimura to keep silent as a government agent barged in with a human rifle. Before he can say anything though, one of those creatures pounced on him and tore his neck open because it was the only part of his body that was exposed. He dropped his weapon as he struggled to get the creature off. I quickly seized the chance to grab the weapon and shoot the creature right in the head. It struggled for a little while and then stopped moving. It was dead. Something clicked within me. At least we could kill them. All we had to do was render the brain useless. I turned back to face Mr. Yukimura and was met with a grisly sight. He had stabbed himself in the neck with a pocket knife, probably to escape being killed in a horrible fashion. A selfish bastard to the bitter end. I grabbed the armor from the official and put it on. I made my way carefully through the lab, looking for any signs of these creatures. I had already thought of a way to stop them all for good. If I could just get to the cryo chamber and activate the sequence, I could render all these creatures dormant and we could get rid of them. I made my way through the rows of bodies on the floor. Looks like not everyone could be turned, or at least survive long enough to be turned. As I made my way through the lab, I could hear the sounds of creatures moving around and searching for more victims. I stopped twice to put two of them down. I was much closer to the cryo chamber now. As I was about to open the door leading to the path through which I could get to the chamber, I heard a sound. Something huge was coming, right behind me. I quickly spun around and saw the shadow of a hulking figure making its way up the stairs. I knew exactly which creature it was. Subject 15. I quickly readied my weapon and took cover behind the machine. I could see it moving closer and closer. It stopped when it got to the edge of the stairs, close to where I was hiding. Then it did something I wasn't expecting at all. It spoke.
No need to keep hiding. I know you're there.
I didn't know what to even do in this situation, so I quickly moved out, kicked the vase close to me towards the creature, and got on my feet as I aimed for its head. How on earth did you do that? You just spoke. That shouldn't be possible. Then again, I thought to myself, no one had ever seen anything like this before. This was all new territory. It looked at me with those two ugly-looking heads and spoke again.
I thank you for creating me and bringing my kind to life. The purpose is quite clear to me now. My kind will drive every last human on this planet into extinction, and then we will reign supreme.
Not if I could do something about it, I said, as I fired a few rounds into its head. And just as I expected, that wasn't enough to kill it. I quickly kicked the door of the cryo chamber open as I ran straight for the lever that would render them all dormant. As I got to it, I was horrified to see that it had been smashed and destroyed. How? The creature slowly made its way into the chamber.
I've already anticipated your every move, Mr. Jim. We will not be denied of our destiny.
That's a load of crap. I'm not gonna allow that at all. As I was about to shoot one more time, one of those tentacles slammed into my ribs with such force that it took all the air from my lungs. I struggled to move and grab the rifle on the floor. Subject 15 made a sound that sounded like a mentally derailed man's laughter. It reached down and grabbed my head and began crushing my skull. I screamed in agony as it flung me into the next room. Thankfully, this was close to an elevator. I forced myself up, much to the protest of my broken ribs and legs. I was able to escape and move into an abandoned building not too far from the lab. It was there I found a recording device, the one which I now use to relay this account. So listen, don't ever experiment on things you don't understand. Don't let those damned officials push you to forget your integrity. Never agree to their terms, because when things go bad, they will never be there to help. As I make this last recording, I can hear Subject 15 nearing my location. It's whistling and moving casually, knowing that it's taking over the entire country. I'm not even sure anyone's alive out there. If you get this, please share it to the whole world. This is not a story. It's reality, and it could easily happen to you too.
There you are, Mr. Jim. What do you say we pick up our conversation from where we left off?